All right, welcome to the next section of the DE 154. We're going to be talking a little bit about some financial type of information over the next few days. Let me just make this full screen. There we go. And the first thing we want to do is make sure that you guys are all on the same page. Some of you have taken the personal finance class in the high schools that you're required to take for graduation. Others of you have not. So we're just going to go over some definitions. I'm going to go through them at a normal rate. Please pause the video, take notes, write these things down. If you need to abbreviate, that's fine. They're your notes, but just make sure that you're not just watching it. I mean, if it's something that you already know, that's fine. But on the next slide, you're probably going to want to definitely take some notes. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about functions and inputs and outputs. A function is basically a relationship. We normally think of a function as an equation, where the quantities, we have inputs and we have outputs. And the important part about a function is that every input is paired up with one and only one output. So if you think of your x's being your input, your y being your output, your x and your y will only be paired up with one. For every x, you'll only have one y. Okay, so I already kind of gave you a little information about inputs. We normally think of those as x values or down here as part of the domain, but that is a value that is plugged into the function. The function then returns an output or a y value. That's usually part of the range. Okay, moving on. There's your output. That's what the function gives you once you've plugged in the inputs. Constant function. I'm going to get rid of this. One sec. Arrow back up there just a little bit. Thank you. So a constant function is where an input is fixed. You know, a lot of people immediately think of pi, 3.14. Other fixed inputs are sales tax rate for a particular state or the density of water. You know, you see these in other courses besides just mathematics. A one-to-one function is a function for which every input has a different output, and every output has one and only one input. So it's kind of, those words are kind of confusing, but if you think about it, it's similar to the opposite of a constant function. Now, domain and range, probably don't need to talk about that too much. We like to think of domain as the collection of all of the inputs, and we call that independent variables. And then the range is the set or collection of all the outputs, and we call those the dependent variables. Okay, so moving on, talking a little bit about lending money, some financial terms here. These are where I think you may need to stop and pause the video a little bit more, take some a little bit more notes here if you aren't familiar with these terms. A couple of them are going to have some formulas. The principal of a loan is how much that the person borrows. So let's say I buy a car for $20,000. I put down $5,000 of my own money. I need to borrow the remaining $15,000. That $15,000 is the principal. The interest and the interest rate are what you pay. Let me get rid of that real quick. That's what you pay to borrow that money. The rate is just a rate that is applied to the principal. So, you know, if you think about mortgage rates, maybe you guys are somewhat familiar. If your parents are buying a home or refinancing a home, mortgage rates are really low right now, 3%, something like that. So they would take that 3%, apply it to the principal, and that would give you your interest. The period is the length of time before your next payment. And with loans, it is typically monthly. I mean, if you think about a car loan, a home mortgage, even a credit card, which is actually a way of borrowing money, those bills are due monthly. But it can be different depending on what you're buying. Like furniture can have a different period than monthly. A balance is what you owe at the end of each period. An APR, or annual percentage rate, is the interest rate for a period of 1 year. Now, these last two are going to have some formulas associated with them, and I'll show you those formulas. Here, the periodic rate is the interest rate for a period other than 1 year. So it's the APR divided by the number of periods in a year. So, for example, a 6% APR computed monthly will give 6% divided by 12, because there's 12 months in a year, and that is a 0.5% periodic rate. So it's just the rate for that period of time. And your annual percentage yield is all the total interest for the year divided by the original principal. And let me show you. I'm going to skip ahead. Not that one. Right here. So I wrote up here helpful formulas. So you'll have this video. You can write these down now if you want to. But here's some examples of periodic rates. Periodic rate equals APR divided by N. How many periods or how many payments are you making in a year? And APY, total interest in 1 year divided by the original principal. Everybody got that? Feel free to write that down. Okay, so a large portion of this course is going to be about financial literacy. And obviously, I think we've made it very clear we're going to be using a lot of spreadsheets. That is required by Germana. So understanding how to translate these types of problems into a spreadsheet scenario is very important. So I can let you read that. You can pause and read that. But this is just sort of a little background on what a large portion of this course entails. I know it doesn't feel very statistics oriented at the moment, but we will get into that. I promise. So let's talk about an example. We're going to do this one together. So you're going to college. You buy a Sony flat screen TV for your dorm room that costs $1,000. You make the purchase with a store credit card. That means you basically are borrowing the money from Best Buy or wherever you bought the TV, Costco credit card, something like that. And that card has a 12% annual percentage rate, or APR. You do not have to make any monthly payments for the first year. Woohoo, that sounds good. But they will still charge you interest at the end of each month. So while you're not making any payments, you are still paying for it when you get to the end of the first year. So you're sitting there going, okay, so how much interest is going to accrue that first year that I'm eventually going to have to pay Best Buy? So let's talk about the first question. The first question says, what is the principal? How much are you borrowing? So in your brain, try to answer that. And I'll show you the right answer for that. You're borrowing $1,000. Okay. And it says, what is the monthly or periodic interest rate? Well, remember, periodic interest rate is APR divided by the number of payments in a year. Now, I know you're not making any payments the first year, but they're accruing interest as if you were making payments. So let's take a look at the calculation. So APR is 12% divided by 12 months in a year. 12 divided by 12 is 1, or 1%. So your monthly periodic interest rate is 1%. And if you think about it, this monthly interest is a function of two inputs. It's a function of the principal, or that's for the first month, or the balance if you're thinking about the subsequent months, and the periodic interest rate, because you're going to use that periodic interest rate to calculate the interest that you're paying every month. So I'll show you an example of a spreadsheet. So what they've done here, let's just take a look at this. They've said, okay, my principal is $1,000. My APR, 12%. The period is monthly. How many periods do we have in 1 year? We have 12. And we're not sure what they did here. Maybe they just typed that in, or maybe they wrote a formula. So they might have written a formula here that says, let me get sorry, I don't have my pen. There we go. Wasn't letting me pull up that pen. So this could very simply be, it's not letting me, okay, so let me hit that. See if it'll let me do it here. No, it's not. So that could be this cell right here, which looks like G2 divided by G5. So they could have done that. They could be writing that formula. Oh, here, now it's letting me write. My computer just had to decide. So they could be writing G2 divided by G5. And that could be what's going into here. We're just not sure. But that's a good thing to, kind of know how to do when you're trying to find periodic rate. Now, over here on the left-hand side, what they've done is they've set up monthly in column A. So we got month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4. And I'm sure it goes down further because we'll eventually want to know what happens at the end of the first year. So we want to go out to month 12. Now, what it's doing here is it starts with the balance. When you first make that purchase, you're spending $1,000. So your balance is $1,000. But then in that first month, we're taking that balance or principal and we're multiplying it times this periodic rate, which is 1% or 0.01. And that's going to give you $10 in interest in the first month. So at the end of the first month, you owe $1,010 for that TV. You've been watching it for a month, you've been Netflixing it and Huluing it and playing PS4, and you now owe $10 more. Okay? So now that balance, that new balance, they've taken this 1,000 plus this 10, that becomes 1,010. That becomes your new balance for the next month. Then we're going to take the 1,010 times that periodic rate, and they're going to get $10.10. Look good? And then when they add those two together, $1,020.10, because they took the 1,010 plus the $10.10 and got this value. So at the end of the second month, that's how much you owe on that television. So if I wanted to know, back to the original question, let me go back here. How much do you owe at the end of the year, the first year? Then I'm going to need to be able to pull this formula down or fill it down. See how we grab that fill handle and we quickly pull it downward so that we have 12 months. So it says here you must have months 1 through 12 already filled in, but you can fill those just as well as I did. We did that in some of our activities. Now, just a point of discussion on absolute references and mixed references and relative references. This is just, and it didn't come out so well when I put it into the PowerPoint. So I'm going to rewrite it. So if we're talking about the cell A4, I'm just going to give you a quick little reminder on this. That changes the row number and changes the column number. There's no dollar signs in there. But when you put a dollar sign out in front of A4, it changes the row number and it fixes the column letter. See how that dollar sign is right by the A? It's going to fix the letter A. But if I put the dollar sign, let me write this a little clearer here. A dollar sign 4, that dollar sign is now right in front of the 4. So it's going to fix the row number, row 4, and it's going to change column A. There's no dollar sign in front of A. So it's going to let A change from A, B, C, D, E, but it's going to keep you on row 4. And then if you want to keep everything, like if you want a particular cell, you want to fix that absolute reference to that cell, you're going to put 2 dollar signs in there. So I just like the idea of kind of hitting that again. Okay, so let's answer some questions. Oops, I'm still drawing. Sorry about that. So in the spreadsheet above, what formula is in cell C4 and in cell D4? Well, let's go back and look. Let's take a moment. I'm going to erase what I did here. We talked about the formula for G6, but now they want us to talk about, and let me just grab a quick highlighter here. They want to know C4 and D4. That's what they want to know. And we already kind of talked about that, but let's write a formula for C4. We would write the equal sign, and then we would use this cell reference. So we would use B4 times, and then here, maybe we want to use this one, even though it's a percent, that's okay. We could use G6. But because this is never going to change, what we need to do is put ourselves an absolute reference in there for the periodic rate, because that periodic rate's never going to change. It's going to stay 1% all the way. Now for D4, which is here, that's a little simpler. Remember, all we did was we took B4 and C4 and we added them together. That's pretty easy. And on these, you don't want to use any absolute or mixed references on that. So let's go back to our slide. So I put some information there, but I did not write the formula. I kind of gave you some words. And you could just do this. You could just multiply it by 0.01. That's okay too, rather than using that absolute cell reference. That's not a horrible thing to do. All right, question 5. Oops, sorry, moving the wrong thing. So we talked about this. Which formula involves an absolute cell reference? And there's your absolute cell reference. Sorry about that. With the G6, just like I showed you here with the 2 dollar signs. Hang on, it's just very slow to respond for some reason, my computer is. All right, now why do we need to fill in the second row and the first row before we fill the formulas down? Well, remember, that first row gives you a balance that then becomes the new balance in the second row. So that in that first couple of calculations, your first and second month, you need that to demonstrate what we call a recursive type of relationship, where the new one is dependent on the one before it. That's called a recursive relationship. So we needed both of those particular rows before we can fill down. Now I want to show you what that looks like when we fill down. So you can see that they grabbed that handle right here and they dragged it down, and that's what they owe. This very last amount, the new balance, they have added, well, they've got $1,126.83, and they started out with $1,000. So whatever is more than $1,000 is their interest payment for the whole year. So you could subtract that on a calculator, or you could write yourself a little formula, but I think most of us can see that the interest has grown kind of rapidly. You're already paying $126.83 of interest just in the first year for that television. Okay, so what do you owe at the end of the first year? And what is the APY? Okay, so remember, APY is total interest in 1 year divided by the principal. So we have the total interest being that 126.83 divided by 1,000, which was our principal, and that gives you the APY. So that's kind of just a very interesting lesson in, wow, look at how much money it costs to buy a $1,000 television at 12%. 12% is a pretty high rate, but that's not unusual for those kinds of store cards. It's actually very possible for store credit cards to be even more expensive. So I'm going to pause the video here and flip down to the end where I've got some notes. You should not have done anything in Excel yet, okay? So all of that should have just been watching what I was doing, okay? At the end, when we're all done, I'm going to stop this video because I think it's long enough and I want us to have a little break from it. You should have 3 sheets in your Excel spreadsheet, 3 tabs down at the bottom. I shouldn't say sheets, it's a tab. So you should have one from the next example that we're going to do, one for guided practice activity 2, which is coming up, and one for guided practice activity 1, and that's going to be with a car. So again, I'm going to stop this video. I'm going to pick up right here. So when we start the next video, you're going to need from Canvas either the Excel spreadsheet file, table_1_2, or you're going to need, if you don't have access to Excel, you're going to need in the Canvas module to go to the Google Sheet link and make a copy of that for yourself. And then change the name on it, so that you have something with your last name, probably would be best. And then we'll do this together. We'll talk about a little bit more complicated with how to figure out how much you're paying. All right. Thank you very much for watching.